Hey, it's Majusen here and welcome to my channel Halal LINKCOOL. Now, I've decided to create a range of diverse content in long form materials revolving around Islamic history and related items for the benefit of the people that subscribe or come and listen or watch content on this channel. It takes great time and resources to create long form content, so I'm asking you, if you can, support me on my Patreon website or feel free to donate so I can bring you worthwhile content that can help you learn and increase as well as enhance your knowledge about Islamic history and heritage. In this episode, I explore pagan Arabia before the arrival of Islam and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now, tribes had existed in Arabia for thousands of years. Early tribes, such as Thamud, we have documented evidence that they were around approximately 5,000 years ago. After Thamud, we have evidence of the tribes of Saleh, who was also an Islamic Arabian prophet. You can literally see evidence of the dwellings of these people as houses were carved out of rock formations which still exist till this very day. Eventually, these tribes of Thamud and Ad became extinct, and it is believed that their remnants do not exist today. But we do have evidence of other Arab tribes which were remaining, known as Al-Arab al-Baqiya in Arabic, which means the remaining tribes, who were split into two categories. These two tribes can be split into Qahtan and Adnan. Qahtan's descendant was named Ya'rab. Now, this is where we probably get the term Arab from. It is also said that the Arabic language can be traced back to Ya'rab as well. Although there are a number of diverse opinions, one strong opinion states that Qahtan was a descendant of one of Noah's sons, Sam. Therefore, the descendants of Sam are known as Samites. These are a Semitic speaking people which share culture, tradition and languages such as Aramaic, Arabic and Hebrew. The majority of the Qahtani tribes lived in southern Arabia. Even the Aus and the Khazraj, which were the tribes living in Medina during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, were also descendants of Qahtan. A term often used to describe the Qahtanis is the original Arabs. Now, in contrast, Adnan lived in a different time period. He was a direct descendant of Ismail, known as Ishmael in English, the son of the Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was Adnani, as he was a descendant of Adnan, therefore making him a direct descendant of the Prophet Abraham, known as Prophet Ibrahim in Arabic. The Prophet Ibrahim was not an Arab. He originated from a city called Ur in modern-day Iraq, which is known as the cradle of civilization. Ishmael married into the Qahtani tribes and therefore began speaking Arabic. Adnan, being a direct descendant of Ishmael, probably existed around 10 generations after Ishmael. This was close to maybe 4 or 5 centuries. Subsequently, this led to the diverse range of tribes that we had in Arabia before the coming of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, foremost the tribe of the Quraysh, which were the leaders of Mecca. Now, particularly in this time period in Arabia, genealogy was one of the most important things that the Arab tribes cared about. We know, according to most sources, that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the 20th direct descendant of Adnan. Pre-Islam, the Arabs practiced paganism. They had many gods, and even within the Holy Kaaba, which is the black cube box that many of you have seen on the television, whilst people are circumnavigating it during Umrah and the pilgrimage of Hajj, this particular area is known as the Haram. It's a sanctuary of peace. Nobody is allowed to harm anybody there, pluck leaves, or even hunt game. The pagan Arabs had many rituals and traditions at this time. There were remnants of the religion of the Prophet Abraham, which is exactly the same as Islam. As Muslims believe that all the prophets that came to this earth were all following the same religion, but had different laws at different time periods for different groups of people, whereas the Prophet Muhammad had come to this world for the whole of mankind until the end of time. The Haram area was a space of safety. It is said that during the time of the pagan Arabs, people would perform their religious rituals and sometimes even see murderers, the people that had killed their own family members. And they couldn't do anything to these murderers because they were in the Haram area, which was a place of sanctuary, and they stuck to these traditions even at that time. During the main ritual of Hajj, the pagan Arab tribes from the whole of Arabia would arrive at the Kaaba. They would bring with them animals for sacrifice, covered in garlands, flowers, rose petals, and made to look beautiful, so that they could be sacrificed and the meat distributed amongst the poor around Mecca. Now this was actually a ritual taken from the religion of the Prophet Abraham. As mentioned before, some of the remnants of the religion of the Prophet Abraham were actually being practiced by the pagan Arabs at that time. Now, you may wonder where paganism infiltrated Arabia, because the Prophet Abraham worshipped one God known as Tawheed, the Arabic word for the oneness of God. According to Sahih Muslim, a hadith, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, tells us where paganism started in this region and how. Amin ibn Huzay al-Ruzahi was the one man that this was down to. This was the first person to change the religion of Abraham and Ismail, as well as bringing in superstitions. It is said that this man at one stage travelled to Syria, where he met the Amalekites, who were known to be worshipping idols. Upon engaging in conversation with these people, he asked them, "What are these idols?" The Amalekites replied that these particular idols are actually our source and our power. They prayed to these idols, asking for assistance in daily life. It was then that this man asked them if he could have one of their idols. So the Amalekites decided to give him one idol, which was called Hubal. This particular idol became the main core idol for the whole of Arabia, and it was also the main idol for the Quraysh tribe. So, this is the story of how paganism and idol worship became popular in Arabia and Mecca. We don't know the exact date that Ahmed ibn Luhay was around, because one of the amazing things of Arabia at that time was that it didn't have its own calendar. Actually, the Arab tribes used major occasions and events as dates. When one contemplates how one individual was able to spread paganism amongst the Arabs so rapidly, we need to think about a few different things. Now, with Amr ibn Luhay, he was actually the ruler of the tribe at that time, so he was quite influential and liked by his fellow tribesmen. So when he started to introduce the pagan idol, others started to follow. And in addition to this, the time period between Amr ibn Luhay and the Prophet Abraham must have been at least 2,000 years, meaning that guidance had not come to the Arab nation for a long period of time, so some of the elements of the religion of the Prophet Abraham had been lost. So, with misguidance rife, some of the pagan Arabs would take small chips of stone from the actual Kaaba building when they left with their caravans on trade missions or when they went out into the desert. They would use these small stones and place them down and actually worship them as their idols. According to Islamic principles, the bricks themselves are not actually holy, they are just building material. Rather, it's the actual area which is the holy part. The Kaaba today is in a cube shape, but many people don't know that in the past it was actually a rectangular shape, and every few decades it gets changed and rebuilt. But the cube shape has been maintained. Ironically, many of these pagans believed in Allah, the God, but they also believed that they needed to go through these other idols to get closer to God. And due to the fact that they didn't have an actual creed, many of these people believed in different things. However, although most of the Arabs at that time were pagans, there were still some people who turned away from associating partners with Allah. They actually didn't believe in paganism. However, there were only a handful of these people known as Hanif, those that turn away from shirk. One of these righteous individuals was a Christian man called Waraka. He was a cousin of Khadijah, who was the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, first received revelation in the cave Hira, he came down back to the home of his wife, and his wife had told Waraka what had happened, and Waraka had confirmed that this was one of the signs of true prophethood, and he accepted the Islamic faith. Waraka referred to Angel Gabriel as Namus, the angel that was giving revelations to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, with the first word being revealed as Iqra, which means read in Arabic. Pre-Islam, the Arabian Peninsula also had people of different faiths, such as Judaism. Many of the Jewish tribes who lived in Arabia lived in the city of Medina. At that time, it was known as Yathrib. Other Christian communities were spread out in Arabia up to the north and also the south in places such as Yemen. However, some of the Christians did not believe in the Trinity and had different views and perspectives of how they practiced Christianity. Ibn Khaldun, a famous Muslim historian, commented on ancient civilizations such as those that grew from areas like the River Nile and the ancient Mesopotamian plains. Now, he also stated that these areas had large cities where hustle and bustle of trade would exist, which is what happened in Mecca, as Mecca was quite central in the Arabian Peninsula, and many people would pass through Mecca on their way to southern Arabia, and this then became a focal point of trade and commerce. Arabia was a hot, dry and arid region with plentiful deserts. It was surrounded by famous kingdoms and leaders such as the Byzantium Empire with the Emperor Heraclius and Khusro of the Persian Empire during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Romans referred to southern parts of Arabia as Arabia Felix. Before the noble birth of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, many of the tribes in Arabia through inter-rivalry would often fight each other for dominance of the region or the local area. It was actually post the arrival of Islam that the tribes were united under the banner of one faith via the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. In this episode, you have been able to learn about ancient Arabia, pre-Islam, and how the pagan Arabs lived their lives, as well as the context before the arrival of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you can stay up to date with all the latest content.